Jeremy's POV. It had been an unusually usual day the first time I read those words. The days had started blending into each other. Same gray walls, same buzzing of the overhead lights, same dry reports that stacked on my desk like bricks waiting to bury me alive. My unit liked to joke that intel officers weren't real soldiers. We were the guys who sat behind desks with pens instead of rifles. Most of the time, they weren't wrong. I'd been buried under a mountain of reports so dull they could put a caffeinated mule to sleep. I was midway through tallying troop deployments for the umpteenth time when something unusual tumbled onto my desk. A single envelope slipping out of the official batch, like it had fallen from the heavens just to ruin my day. I picked it up, squinting at the faded stamp. Soviet Union. My brow shot up. What the hell? My first instinct was to hand it to the commanding officer. Seriously, this screamed trouble. But I paused. Something about it didn't scream standard issue. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe it was some prank from the intelligence interns. Still, curiosity got the better of me. I reminded myself, though, that one wrong move could ruin everything. Protocol first, thrill later. I stepped a few paces away, shielding the envelope from the prying eyes of Sergeant Matthews, who was busy glaring at the paperwork as if his life depended on it. Inside was typed neatly on thin, cream-colored paper. The words didn't just relay information, they danced with wit and a weird sense of personality. I blinked, rereading it, because there was no way a Russian officer would sign off with a joke. To the sharp-eyed American who finds this, we've noticed your fascination with borders and bureaucracy. Admirable, really. Please consider this a friendly nudge. The 3rd Infantry is planning a strategic exercise near the northern perimeter. Details follow. Keep your sharp eyes peeled, and don't trip over your own curiosity. Warm regards, Red Fox. My first thought, bait. Why in the hell would a Russian soldier tip us off about troop movements like some over-enthusiastic hall monitor? But something in the phrasing, flippant yet precise, made me pause. And the cipher at the bottom, tiny symbols neatly scribbled, suggested a way to reply without anyone knowing. My pulse spiked, but I forced myself to think clearly. No thrill-seeking yet. First, confirm authenticity. Then, report. I copied the intel from the letter and handed it to my senior officer, Lieutenant Parker, carefully noting that it had come via an unverified channel and was under my supervision. I didn't disclose the sharp-eyed American teasing bit, just the raw intel, so the chain of command could handle it properly without questioning my judgment. Parker raised an eyebrow, but didn't probe further. Good catch, Jeremy. Keep everything logged. I allowed myself a small, guilty smile. Thrill could wait. Procedure came first. But damn it, I was already hooked on the enigma of Red Fox. Later that evening, after handing over the intel to Lieutenant Parker, I lingered awkwardly, trying to read his expression. Anything suspicious about where this came from? I asked carefully. He raised an eyebrow, flipping through the pages. It's unusual, sure, but nothing that screams imminent threat. Keep logging everything, Jeremy. Don't act on it alone. Understood? Understood, I said, nodding firmly. Later, in the privacy of my quarters, I allowed myself a controlled curiosity. I wasn't ignoring protocol. I had the intel logged, the chain of command informed. Writing a reply to the personal part of the letter wasn't forbidden, as long as it stayed discreet and didn't reveal classified info. I drafted my reply, careful to keep it clever but safe. To the elusive Red Fox, I've read your message and impressed doesn't begin to cover it. Curious as I am, I'll follow your instructions. Consider this a tentative handshake across borders. Let's see where your audacity leads us. Green Eyes of America. I sealed it, my hands shaking more than I like to admit. Matthews would have had a field day watching me. Then reality hit. I was standing in the hallway, envelope in hand, thinking, am I seriously about to exchange letters with a supposed enemy soldier? Am I insane? I knew I was skating on thin ice. The protocol screamed at me to let them scrutinize the safety, but curiosity burned hotter than fear, and I hated myself for it. But the thrill of it, the possibility of being the only one who knows, of talking to someone clever enough to make me feel like a fool and intrigued at the same time, was too damn addictive. I took a deep breath and dropped the reply into the dead drop location, trying not to look like I just committed a crime. Part of me laughed at my own ridiculousness, pacing back to my desk with a grin plastered across my face, muttering, "I'm doomed, aren't I?" Back at my desk, I resumed my mundane reports, but the world suddenly seemed brighter. That letter had done something impossible. It made the humdrum of military paperwork feel like an opening act to something far more dangerous and far more fun. 2 weeks later. 2 weeks had passed since the first letter. My life had gone from monotonous drudgery to, well, something dangerously close to obsession. Every morning, I checked the dead drop like a kid waiting for a lottery ticket, my green eyes darting around to make sure Sergeant Matthews wasn't lurking. He probably would have confiscated it if he saw me. Sigh. Then the letters arrived. Not one, two. One filled with hard intel about Russian troop movements, boring but necessary, that I slipped ahead to the authorities. The other, addressed exclusively to me. Green-eyed American. Only Red Fox called me that. I swear, I nearly fell out of my chair the first time I read it, muttering, "Who even does that?" I glanced around. No one was watching, thankfully. My cheeks burned, though. The second letter was different. No numbers, no strategic maps, just words that made me laugh out loud while simultaneously making my stomach twist in a way I was unaccustomed to. Green-eyed American. I see you're good with deadlines, but can you keep up with a mind that likes riddles? I hope your green eyes are as sharp as your paperwork. Or are they just for show? Red Fox. I nearly snorted coffee across the office. I had to shove it into my desk drawer before Lieutenant Parker walked past. He would have so berated me. For the next few days, I paced around my office like a man possessed, secretly rereading the letter under my desk lamp after everyone left. I hid it in the oddest places, inside my copy of Military Protocol, taped under my keyboard, even inside my sock drawer one morning. My own cleverness impressed me, until Matthews nearly caught me peeking at it while pretending to file reports. My heart nearly stopped. The thrill wasn't just the secrecy, it was the connection, the tiny window into the mind of someone who knew the right mix of wit, sarcasm, and subtle compliments to keep me hooked. I found myself imagining Red Fox in all sorts of ridiculous scenarios, which made me snort in the quiet of my office. "I am losing my mind," I muttered, pacing like a caffeinated raccoon. Naturally, I couldn't resist testing him back. My reply was sharper, tinged with sarcasm. "Red Fox, I'm impressed by your riddles, truly. I was beginning to think you were all brawn and no brain. But let's see if your words can keep up with these green eyes. Don't disappoint me. Green-eyed American." I had to chuckle as I slid it into the dead drop, imagining him reading it, smirking, or maybe rolling his eyes. My colleagues noticed my grin. Parker nudged me one day, eyebrow raised. "You spacing out again, Jeremy." Thinking about paperwork? I froze, nearly choking. Yes, very thrilling paperwork." I waved vaguely at my desk. The lie was awful, but Parker didn't press further, probably sensing that whatever it was dangerous. Days later, the letters returned, now sprinkled with small personal details. Favorite coffee orders, complaints about base food, a casual, "Do you ever actually sleep?" It was like a puzzle I wanted to solve, a friendship I shouldn't form but couldn't resist. I grinned like a fool, imagining him reading the reply, thinking I was clever, while I replayed every phrase in my head at night. And yes, every once in a while, I'd let myself think about more than just words. Even in the letters, I could sense a teasing in his tone, like he was smirking at my neat handwriting. The words made my pulse spike in ways military training did not prepare me for. I caught myself pacing, muttering jokes under my breath, laughing alone in the office, and hiding the letters when Matthews wandered too close. By the end of the 3rd week, I had a ridiculous little ritual. Reading Red Fox's letter first thing in the morning, rereading the intel, then savoring the personal one like it was contraband chocolate. I didn't care that it was technically from an enemy soldier. I didn't care that I was probably violating every rule in the handbook. All I cared about was the thrill, the banter, and the tiny spark of attraction that had me smiling like a lunatic to the humdrum walls of my office. 1 week later, the letters had evolved. No longer just cryptic intel and witty remarks, they started including hints about him. The person behind the words. Riddles that made me laugh out loud. Jokes about my stiff green eyes. Subtle compliments that made my chest tighten. I caught myself pacing in my office, reading and rereading. Them, my mind inventing every detail. The way he might smirk while typing, how his voice might sound. And then came the phone calls. I nearly dropped the receiver the first time. My heart was hammering so hard, I worried the entire base might hear it. The secure line buzzed, and there was his voice. Calm, teasing, precise. It was unlike any voice I'd heard in my life. Warm, but commanding. Playful, yet dangerous. "Green-eyed American," he said, the words making my pulse spike. "You actually answered." I was beginning to think you were all talk and no courage. I choked out a laugh, trying to sound casual. "I'm full of surprises," I said, knowing it sounded ridiculous even to my own ears. The calls were at first brief, professional, a careful dance around sensitive information. But soon, the boundaries started to blur. He teased me about my neat handwriting, my love for schedules, and even my obsession with base coffee. I found myself talking longer, saying things I wouldn't dare tell anyone else on the base. In turn, he let his guard slip too. Small confessions about how he paced in his quarters, the way he hummed while decoding messages. And then, the flirtation crept in. At first, it was playful double meanings hidden under military speak. "Make sure your eyes don't wander too far, green-eyed American," he said one night, and I felt my ears go red before I realized he was laughing at me. I replayed it over and over, pressing the phone to my ear while lying in the dark. My heart raced, and I couldn't decide whether to laugh or panic. I was supposed to be an officer, professional, disciplined, but here I was, utterly flustered over a man I had never even met. A week later, the teasing became bolder. "I hope you sleep well, green-eyed American," he murmured softly over the secure line. "Because I've been thinking of ways you might keep up with me when the lights go out." I froze. Blinking in the dark, pressing the phone tighter to my ear, my stomach twisted into knots that had nothing to do with training. "What am I doing?" I whispered back, voice cracking slightly. I might surprise you." We laughed, breathless and ridiculous. And then he'd slip into something serious. "Do you ever actually feel lonely in all this chaos?" And I'd realize I was falling for him, truly. The voice on the other end had become more than words. It was connection, vulnerability, and temptation all wrapped into one. My nights were spent awake, replaying our conversations, imagining his expressions, the heat of his gaze, the warmth of his hands. I couldn't tell anyone, of course. It was dangerous, absurd, and utterly intoxicating. My colleagues noticed my distracted smiles, the way I sometimes murmured to myself in the office. Parker nudged me one afternoon, eyebrow raised, and I just waved vaguely, muttering, "I'm fine. Completely fine." Even the letters still came, carrying riddles, jokes, and subtle compliments, each one more daring than the last. I found myself reading them in bed, tracing the words with my fingers, imagining Red Fox leaning over a table, smirking, waiting to see my reaction. The line between desire and duty blurred more every day. I was exhilarated, terrified, and utterly hooked. I had never connected with anyone this deeply, not even close friends or family. And yet, here was a man I'd never met, teasing me, challenging me, making me ache in ways I didn't know were possible, all through letters and late-night calls. By the end of the month, I was pacing my office at odd hours, muttering in the dark, heart hammering with anticipation whenever the line buzzed. "What are you doing to me, Red Fox?" I whispered once, shaking my head at my own ridiculousness. "I'm supposed to be an officer. I'm supposed to be normal." But normal had nothing to do with him, and I was already lost. 4 weeks in. I used to think attraction was simple. See a guy, maybe flirt, maybe not, move on. But this? Falling for a voice? For a series of letters signed by a man who called himself Red Fox? That wasn't simple. That was madness. And yet, every night, I found myself clutching the receiver in my dark bunk room, his voice curling into me like smoke. "Tell me, green-eyed American." Red Fox purred one evening, his voice dropping lower than usual. "What would you do if I were sitting across from you right now?" My brain fried. Static filled my ears. I laughed too loudly, trying to play it off. "Probably arrest you." "That's what good officers do," he chuckled, slow and dangerous. But after that, I went scarlet. My palm was damp on the phone, and I lowered my voice. Maybe I'd lean closer. Maybe I'd see if your mouth is as sharp as your letters. Silence. Then a sharp inhale on his end. My stomach flipped. And then he whispered, "Careful green eyes." "If I were there, you wouldn't get any sleep tonight." I groaned, slamming a pillow over my face after the call ended. My colleagues probably thought I had indigestion, the way I kept fanning my face during breakfast. Truth was, I'd never blushed so hard in my life. The calls grew bolder after that. Little half-confessions wrapped in teasing, almost like sexting in Morse code. He told me how he liked the idea of my voice against his ear. I told him, hesitantly, about the way I paced at night, restless, imagining fingers on my wrist, a mouth brushing my jaw. We were both too clever to be outright obscene, but it didn't matter. Every word dripped with tension, and I lay awake afterward, aching, heart racing, ashamed and exhilarated all at once. That was where the guilt crept in. Because wasn't I betraying my country? Falling for an enemy soldier? Laughing at his jokes, craving his voice, wanting his touch. Every time I smiled at his riddles, I imagined a superior officer storming into my quarters, yelling, "Treason!" I pictured my mother's face, my commander's face, the history books labeling me the idiot who got seduced by a Russian agent. But then the phone buzzed. His voice teased my name, and all that guilt drowned in warmth and longing. He wasn't just a faceless enemy anymore. He was mine. He masked his side of things with humor, cocky, biting, always laughing at me when I tripped over my words. But underneath, I caught flashes, quiet pauses, breaths he didn't mean for me to hear. One night, just before hanging up, he whispered so softly I almost missed it. "Sometimes I hate this uniform. Sometimes I just want to be anywhere else." With you, I froze, staring at the ceiling, throat tight. "Me too," I whispered, but the line had already gone dead. And then, everything stopped. No letters in the drop, no buzz on the line, nothing. The first day, I told myself he was busy. The second, I pretended not to care. By the third, I was pacing like a lunatic in my office, checking the dead drop twice a day, then 3 times. Sergeant Matthews caught me once, asked why I was out there again, and I mumbled something about routine inspections, probably sounding insane. By the end of the week, desperation had sunk its claws in. I tried the secure line at night, waiting with the receiver pressed to my ear until it went dead. My chest ached, my hands shook, and I hated myself for caring so much. I started drinking at night, just enough to quiet the buzzing in my head, but not enough to make me forget. I didn't want to forget. I replayed his voice over and over in my memory, every teasing phrase, every hushed confession. I even reread the letters, dozens of times. One night, sprawled on my bunk, I whispered them out loud, pretending he was listening. "Green-eyed American," I murmured, imitating his smooth tone. "You'll never keep up with me." My laugh cracked into something painful, and it hit me then, as sharp as the first letter landing on my desk. I loved him. Not the intel, not the thrill, not the secrecy. Him, the voice, the man, the ghost who haunted my nights and left me clutching pages like they were sacred. I fell in love with a man I'd never seen, a man who could very well be dead. And there was nothing I could do but drink, wait, and keep replaying every word until my heart gave out. A month had crawled past since the silence began. I didn't drop letters anymore. What if Red Fox, my Red Fox, had been caught? Or worse, captured by the Russians? Each thought made my stomach twist into knots, and every time I held a pen, my hand froze. I couldn't risk sending another message into his world, not when I had no way of knowing if it would put him in more danger. I lost my appetite. My focus faltered on reports. I spaced out mid-conference, staring at troop movements like they were meaningless doodles. Sergeant Matthews noticed, of course. "Jeremy, you're useless," he barked one afternoon. "5 laps around the training grounds, and don't think you're skipping tonight's paperwork." I survived. Barely. My legs burned, my brain screamed, and I cursed under my breath for being so distracted by him. 3 months in. 3 months slid past like a slow-motion nightmare. And now here I was, assigned the task of listing attendees and awards for the International Honor Ceremony. The list was full of familiar brass and foreign dignitaries. Then one name snagged my eyes. Tim. No surname, just Tim. I snorted. Great. Everyone else gets full military titles, and this guy waltzes in with 1 syllable. Probably some hotshot spy. I shoved it aside and kept working. By the time the ceremony began, my attention wandered. Soldiers lined up perfectly. Speeches dragged. I checked and rechecked my notes, my pen tapping nervously, half distracted. And then the chief began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, today we honor one of our most valuable assets. A man whose courage and intellect prevented what could have been a devastating escalation. A Russian incursion that might have cost countless lives. Please welcome." Tim, the soldiers shifted. Applause. And then he stepped forward. He spoke into the microphone, calm and precise, with that subtle teasing cadence I'd memorized over months. "Thank you, Chief. I accept this honor, though it is not mine alone," he began, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "There is someone here whose advice, patience, and unique way of seeing the world kept me grounded during operations where I had to walk alone. Someone who appreciated my riddles, my occasional sarcasm, and my terrible taste in coffee." I froze. He said riddles, sarcasm, and coffee, the very things from our letters. My pulse leapt. "I hope they realize," he continued, voice softening, "that the little challenges I sent their way weren't just tests of skill. They were invitations to play, to connect, to share, even when I couldn't risk being known." My hands tightened on the pen. Every word, every pause, every inflection, I knew that voice. It was him, my Red Fox. "And yes," he added with a sly grin, visible even from the crowd, "I'm aware that some of my messages may have been maddeningly clever, frustratingly teasing, and perhaps dangerously charming. To the one I know will understand these words, I am grateful for your patience, and I've been waiting for the day you'd recognize me." I couldn't breathe. There was no doubt in my mind. Every nuance, every phrase, the riddles, the teasing, the subtle references only Red Fox and I would get. It was him. Tim was Red Fox. Yes, my Red Fox wasn't a Russian officer at all. He was American, undercover, and standing right in front of me. I wanted to jump across the hall, grab him, shake him, kiss him, and shout, "I've been waiting for you for 3 months, you fool!" But instead, I froze, heart hammering, eyes locked on him. I realized Tim didn't recognize me. Not yet. From the crowd, his eyes scanned, searching for someone familiar. I held my gaze, numb but exhilarated, hoping he'd sense me somehow. But he didn't. He never could know that I was green-eyed American, the one he had laughed at, teased, and whispered to over late nights. My heart twisted painfully, a mix of relief and heartbreak. The room erupted in applause, but I hardly heard it. All I could do was watch him, Red Fox Tim, stand tall, dignified, commanding respect, while I sat with my jaw slack, a goofy grin threatening to split my face. My chest ached, my hands jittered with anticipation. And yet, there was hope. I understood now why he hadn't recognized me. I hadn't revealed myself. I was just Jeremy, the officer in the crowd. But I would make him recognize me. Somehow, I'd bridge the gap between the man who haunted my nights and the one standing on that podium, glowing in accomplishment. For now, I waited, heart pounding, slightly ridiculous, whispering to myself, "You've got this, Green Eyes." He doesn't know yet, but he will. The ceremony adjourned. Applause roared. But I didn't move. My notebook sat forgotten on the table, my pen idle. My mind was elsewhere. Somewhere between disbelief and hope, I waited, patiently, carefully, until the moment I could make him see me. The man behind the letters, the one who had fallen helplessly in love with the voice that had haunted his nights. Later, that night, the after-party had thinned out, leaving clusters of officers laughing over empty glasses and half-finished conversations. I lingered near the exit, trying to think of a reason to talk to him. Him. Tim. My heart hammered every time I saw him in the crowd, but every approach was interrupted. Orders, jokes from colleagues, cameras flashing, everything kept us apart. Finally, just past midnight, I spotted him slipping into his private bunker, alone. My pulse leapt. Alone, slightly buzzed, shoulders relaxed, but still radiating control. This was it. I couldn't let him slip away again. I practically ran, blocking the door behind him. "Tim," I called, voice shaking with nerves and desperation. He looked up, calm and measured, one eyebrow slightly raised. "Can I help you?" His tone was polite, formal, nonchalant, but it stung like a cold splash of water. He didn't know me. He didn't know anything about me beyond the letters and the voice he'd trusted. I couldn't form words now that I finally had him alone, while he kept watching me in amusement. "Yes, you." And then his eyes read the name on my batch. "Jeremy, right?" I couldn't nod, just pulled the letters from my coat, shaking, holding them out. "These," I said, voice trembling. "They're yours." Every single. One. I am your green-eyed American. Tim's eyes flickered, curiosity clashing with disbelief as he took the letters, skimming through them. He leaned back slightly, like he was amused by my intensity. "How am I supposed to believe that? How do I know these really belong to you? That you are the same green-eyed American?" He looked me into my eyes, the green orbs, but I could see he was suspicious. Doesn't he recognize my voice? But maybe he doesn't. I took a shaky breath, frustration bubbling. "Do you see anyone else carrying them? How else would I, green-eyed American, have them?" "It's me, Tim. It's me." He clicked his tongue, leaning casually against the wall, still nonchalant. Anyone could claim that. Anyone could be playing a game. I groaned and ran a hand through my hair. "A game? Tim! For 4 months I've waited, worried, stayed up nights replaying your voice in my head, wondering if you were alive, wondering if you were okay. And now you think this is a joke?" His eyes softened slightly, a flicker of something behind the practiced indifference. But he didn't admit it. He wasn't supposed to. "Why would I give validation to a complete stranger?" he asked, still with arms crossed. I felt my chest tighten, hurt cutting sharply. I understood, though. Undercover, trained, guarded. His skepticism was instinct, part of him as much as his blue eyes. But I couldn't stand it any longer. I am not a stranger, I hissed. We've talked every night. Every night, Tim. Letters, calls, everything we said. I was there. I've been here, waiting for you, and you're acting like you don't even know me. He leaned back, lips twitching, faintly despite himself. My heart sank a little. I pressed closer, lowering my voice, trembling. I needed him to hear, to remember. I recited our letters aloud, every teasing, intimate line, letting my voice crack with emotion. Do you remember, I whispered, on one of our calls? You asked me what I'd do if you were there with me. His posture froze, a hitch in his breath. But he didn't move, didn't speak, expression carefully neutral. I closed the last few inches, my chest nearly touching his. I told you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. I'd lean closer. Maybe see if your mouth was as sharp as your letters. My eyes searched his, pleading, vulnerable. Tim's breath hitched. His hands twitched but stayed at his sides. I could see the moment, like lightning, when realization started to crack the wall he'd built around himself. I stepped back, hurt and teary-eyed, ready to leave. His disbelief delayed his acceptance, and it felt like my heart was breaking again. But before I could reach the door, his hands were on my arms. He pulled me in, desperate, possessive, urgent. His lips crashed against mine, and the world narrowed to the heat of his body and the sharp inhale of his breath. It's you, he whispered against my lips, voice trembling. It's really you. Green-eyed American. I can't believe it. Tears blurred my vision, hot and triumphant. I clung to him, laughing and sobbing all at once. I've wanted to love the man from the letters, the one I thought was my enemy, I admitted, pressing closer. I've dreamed of this, he whispered, fingers tangling in my hair. Kissing the man who stole my heart in those letters. Every night I thought about it. I thought I'd never see or hear you ever. His words broke, replaced by another desperate, deep kiss. Where were you? Do you know how scared I was, thinking something might happen to you? I complained, my voice cracking and small. Tim pressed his forehead to mine. I am sorry. So sorry, my green-eyed, to leave you hanging for 4 whole months. But I couldn't risk your life after coming to know our last conversation was tapped. But by God's grace, the backup assisted me in getting out of the Russian force. But it was tough to return, knowing they were on my trail. But now I am here. We held each other, breathless, finally letting the tension, longing, and months of separation turn into something real, something tangible. Every teasing line, every intimate call, every letter with hidden meanings, they all exploded into passion, laughter, and relief. When we finally broke apart for air, Tim's eyes shimmered, a crooked, vulnerable grin tugging at his lips. You're ridiculous, he muttered. I doubted you were even real. And now here you are, stubborn, green-eyed, and in my arms. I laughed, sniffling, brushing my tears on his jacket. And you're still impossible cocky and secretive, and I love you for it. The bunker felt impossibly small, impossibly safe, and impossibly ours. For the first time, the enemy had become desire. The letters had become love. And months of teasing, flirty, and risque tension had finally, explosively, turned real. Epilogue 6 months later. 6 months later, Tim returned from yet another undercover mission, arms in casts and a faint grimace on his face. I met him at the base, heart hammering, like the first time all over again. But the moment he stepped into the bunker, I couldn't stop myself. You absolute idiot, I scolded, pacing in front of him, voice trembling with equal parts relief and exasperation. Do you have any idea how worried I've been? Do you think I sleep peacefully while you're out risking your life? And now look at you, fractured arms, fractured. How could you even, ugh, I gestured wildly, accidentally bumping into his costed arms, and he flinched, chuckling softly. Tim just leaned back, that infuriatingly calm, cocky smirk plastered on his face. Green eyes, he murmured, voice husky, teasing. You do realize that talking so much only gives me more reasons to focus on you, don't you? I threw my hands up. Focus on me? Focus on me. I've been scolding you for half an hour. How is that focus? Before I could protest further, he closed the gap, pressing his lips to mine in a firm, deliberate kiss. I froze for a heartbeat, the scolding dying on my lips as warmth and relief flooded every nerve. When he pulled back, just enough to smirk at me with a gleam in his icy blue eyes, I caught my breath. Now you know, he said, husky and teasing. My mouth is as sharp as my letters. Or maybe sharper than my letters, I blinked, caught between laughter and disbelief. Sharper? I repeated, shaking my head, voice softening despite the storm of emotions. He grinned, tugging me closer, despite his casts, and I let myself melt into him, the months of longing, letters, and secret calls condensed into this one perfect, ridiculous, undeniable moment. God, you're impossible, I whispered, laughing and sniffling, hands on his shoulders. And you, he murmured, brushing a thumb across my cheek. Love it. Admit it. I rolled my eyes, but my heart was full, bursting with warmth, relief, and a little amusement. Maybe I do, I admitted softly, leaning into him. And there, in the bunker that had once held our nervous, secret letters and confessions, we found laughter, teasing, and love, real, messy, and ours, finally free from distance, fear, and pretense. The night stretched long, full of warmth, whispered laughter, and touches that promised more than words ever could. And as he smirked again, leaning into me with that cocky charm I'd fallen for, I couldn't help but think. Some things, like Red Fox and Green-Eyed American, were just meant to be. And maybe exchanging love letters with my enemy was worth every risk. The end. If the man who stole your heart in letters showed up in front of you after ghosting you for months, would you hug him or punch him first? Thanks for watching. Subscribe to become part of our Rainbow Force, and consider joining our membership for early access and exclusive content. Stay wholesome.